look directly at who came before me because I value exactly what they've done for their entire lives in this field.
I did want to ask, because this is a pet peeve that I have when people use photos of Joe Kubert and it's not attributed to him, and it's like, this is Steve Ditko in the modern day. Or did that bother you?
I don't think I've ever really seen that before, to be honest. I don't go looking for it. I think whenever I see pictures of my grandpa, I'm just like, hey, that's my grandpa, you know? So I totally have a theory about, like fans and comic book artists that no one ever knows what they actually look like because comic book artists, they hide behind their art. Yes, you can probably like tell that I draw the faces that I draw, because of the expressions and everything, but I mean, all in all, I could not spot out every single comic book artist that I like in a crowd, Like I do not know what any of them look like. And I kind of expect it. Sometimes people will come up to me and they'll basically ask about, like if my dad is there or my uncle is there. Some people have come up to me and thought that I was my cousin Katie, who is an editor at DC. So they came up to my like table at a convention and they were just like, can you look at my portfolio? And I was like, yeah, I can. Like, that's fine. And so I was looking at it and they're just like, so what do you look for at DC? Like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I only worked for DC like once. And they're just like, oh, wait, are you Katie? And I'm like, no. That's happened multiple times. So, what can you do?
Is everyone in your family like associated with comics? Not like everyone.
Anyone who has the last name Kubert is related. So if you see Kubert, they're related somehow.
What are you working on right now? You have the Stoneheart book coming out. You have Pandora, which is part of the Frank Miller imprint. We were talking about Inkblot before we got started. Is that still happening?
Inkbot is right now on a hiatus, and it's just because we're working on other projects right now. I mean, all the projects that I'm working on now is the reason why I can't do Inkbot. Inkbot is one of those stories that we definitely want to go back to because it's one of those stories that's very long and very epic. So I feel like we need more, I don't know, we need more people behind it. We need more support so that we can just keep going with the issues and we can just keep creating them because it's such an amazing world. Like we've literally created 7 different worlds that we can just explore throughout all of Inkblot and through this magical black cat, of course. And and I mean, there's just so much we can do with it that it's kind of impossible for us not to go back to it one day. It's just so continuous.
You get to the last one, it's like, wait, did it just end? Is this
Yeah.
it? So yeah, I mean, that's the thing that people don't acknowledge a lot of the time. And I don't know
Mhm.
if you've been on the side of this where it's like people are making this. It's not just like content pumping machines. Like people have other things to work on. And
I was actually just discussing that I think that's the coolest part about comics is that you're realizing that the creation of the comic literally comes right from the hands of the creators. Like you don't have many channels that it goes through before it ends up in your hands as like a fan or a consumer. So it's just like I think it's just so cool how direct it is, from creator to fan.
none of this AI art, none of this weird.
Yeah, I'm very against it. I think every other artist is too.
Yeah, that and like the chat, what is it, GPT, where it's like the AI art and AI writing. It's just all of this.
Yeah.
And then you look at it, it's like this isn't, I guess on a surface level, if you're illiterate, it works. But if you actually hold a microscope up to it, it's like this ain't right.
Probably maybe can be used as a tool one day, but it's nothing without what we provide for it. Might as well get it from the source.
So you were talking about Inkblot earlier. Some of the stuff that you're working on right now, like Stoneheart, you're working on by yourself. How are you doing the Inkblot book? Is that, full script or I guess, Marvel
Inkblot,
method?
Inkblot, I created with my co-creator Rusty Glad, and he's also my partner in, everything in life. We basically graduated from the Kubert School together. We were in the same class, so it was kind of natural to be able to work together on a project. And so when we had the opportunity to pitch Inkblot, we kind of established a way of working that was somewhat Marvel methody. What we would do is we would basically come up with an overall plot for each issue, each arc, each issue, etc. And it would just be like a sentence. It would be, we would write on a post-it note like what this issue would be. From there, I would take that post-it note and I would lay out 20 pages of layouts and pencils. After that, Rusty would take those pencils and he would ink them and he would tighten everything up. Then I would go in and color it while he was lettering it and writing the dialogue. So really it's a very intertwined process, basically.
I like that though, because is there a lot of room for flexibility where it's like maybe you wrote something on that post-it note, but then when you're drawing or coloring or lettering the page, it's like, wait, maybe we can tweak this to just like.
Oh, definitely. Like there's so much spontaneity with that. And the fact that you're like basically collaborating with almost everything about it means that you're creating something that's entirely new because it's not just you creating it, it's not just your partner creating it, you're creating it together. And that becomes something entirely, as I said before, new. And so that was really the cool part about it. And that spontaneity part, I mean, that's like the whole theme of Inkblot. That's what the cat is all about. It's just a random void of chaos. So we have to tell the story like that.
And there's like so much person. It has one line. It just says one word. It's like
Now,
there's so much. Yeah.
yeah, if you own a cat, you know what it's all about. This Inkbot cat is literally just a cat, but every time it does the most cat things, it accidentally releases its magic and it's godlike. It can do anything, but we don't know what's going on in that brain. It's probably the smallest brain ever. Like we don't know.
The first three issues you're reading it, and it's like kind of tame. It's just like the cat stuff. It's just like don't knock those books over. Issue 4, it's like all of a sudden like fighting a sphinx, people are getting beheaded. It's like, wait, I wasn't. How are you two planning all of this stuff? Or is it planned long term, or is it like, hey, we'll do a dragon in this issue, we'll do a sphinx in this issue, we'll do some.
Well, I would say it's definitely like our world building took place way before we created the issues. So each world we had, a set of, I don't know, rules, I guess, established. So like these kind of creatures inhabited this world, these kind of creatures inhabit this world, etc. And so we were able to just kind of, as we were creating the plot, we were able to just pluck from our world building and use those things as plot devices. So, and that's also like another running theme of Inkblot is the creatures that inhabit the worlds. It's not just about, the sorcerers, it's about sorcerers versus these creatures, all of these magical creatures. We really want to showcase that. And basically, every single issue that you see something a little bit new and a little bit whimsical, and you find a little bit more about the lore of everything while progressing with the plot, but also getting just like a standalone story for yourself. So if you wanted to like read Inkblot out of order, that's totally fine. Like if you want to pick up issue, I don't know, 7, you'd get Eliza with her buddies on Earth and she's throwing a party and then a giant scary monster comes out. Like, and you get a simple story. But when you start reading things in order or all together, you start to unravel this larger plot at hand. And as I said before, that's something that we want to establish and keep going after this hiatus that we're on.
Actually love that. I don't know how you read comics where it's like you need to read the collected edition or if you like pick up like a random one. I love the flexibility where, you mentioned you can just pick up issue 7 you don't have to read everything, but also if you read everything, it just kind of makes it better.
I think that's really what it's about, like inviting people to read comics because that's one of the hardest things that I thought was so difficult to get into comics about. Like you think you have to start at number 1 of, 200 issues and that's like a long feat to do. It just kind of feels like you're already set up for failure when it's already coming out monthly and you're starting at ground zero and you're starting at ground zero everywhere. I remember reading an article like when Inkblot came out and someone said that this was a great series for someone who's starting to like get into comics and that is like one of the highest praises for me for me because that's exactly what I want for my work to do is to invite more people into comics and have just a simple story to follow, but be invited to do it any way they want to, really.
Your family's so steeped in comics that it's like, did you have trouble getting into them? Like, were you reading maybe not even just their stuff, but were you checking out comics? Or
Uh,
like, what were your first comics? I guess that's like three questions I know, but feel free to pick whichever one you want. We can just run with it.
I'll say like when I got into comics because honestly, I really didn't get into comics until I was older. When I was younger, I liked, like Cartoon Network comics, like Powerpuff Girls. I love Calvin and Hobbes. Like that's a holy Bible of mine, but that's what I loved when I was a kid. Other than that, really, I didn't really take to like superhero comics. My dad would get, boxes of comics. We lived in the town right next to the Kubert School, so I was at the Kubert School growing up as well. And I was surrounded by comics, but I didn't always I guess like from my viewpoint, I didn't really see comics that were specifically for me, especially when I was getting older to that kind of preteen teenager stage, that I didn't see comics like from DC or Marvel or other companies that were in the Western comics, sphere that were really geared towards, a young teen girl. I was mostly exposed to a lot of Batman and a lot of Superman, and that was just something I was not interested in reading as a young teen girl. And so I honestly took a little bit more to manga and anime. And then I took more to animation in general. And it was because animation seemed like something that felt like it was for everyone, especially at the time that I was growing up. We were at the height of Pixar, when all of those movies were coming out, Toy Story, and then later on Up comes out, Monsters Inc., all of that. I was just like living for it. And it was because those stories were for everyone. They weren't just for like one specific group of people. Anyone could enjoy it, whether you're 6 years old or 60 years old or anything else. I always loved that. I love that everyone can enjoy a story and get something different out of it. I originally started to go for animation before I went for comics. So after high school, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design for animation. I was going through the course and I realized that animation was just not for me. I did not like drawing each and every cell. I didn't really like the programs. And again, it just wasn't for me. So that was when I made like an executive decision to leave to go to the Kubert School. Also, during that time when I was in college, I interned at DC Comics. So that also exposed me to a little bit more of the comics world. And I remember when I was working in it, I was working in the manufacturing department. And so that's where basically you make the corrections before it goes to print. So they're the last people to like receive the comics and make sure it's all good looking to go to print and be published. And my boss comes in and brings me an omnibus of Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti's Harley Quinn. And at that time, Harley Quinn was starting to get popular, like she was on the incline. And it was because of them. And so I started reading the book as I was correcting it because my boss was like, "You might want to read it. I think you'll like it." And I'm like, "All right, all right, all right." So I start reading it, and I'm just like, "This is awesome." This was like the absolute first time that I saw the representation of a female character that wasn't so much of a hero, not so much of a villain, even though she is more villainous. She had this like insane personality, and I just took to it. I was like, this is awesome. This is something that's very different. And somehow I feel like at the time it was a little bit more relatable than I could see other superheroes being. And so that's when I feel like that's kind of when I got the spark in the back of my head where I was like, do comics. You know? So I was just like, okay, I might try this out. I will give it my all and I will go for it and I will try my best. That's when I decided to go back to the Kubert School, but at this time I was also like very hesitant about going into the comics world because again, I was really only exposed to like superheroes and manga, and I just didn't draw like that. And that's not how I wanted to draw. I didn't even know really how I wanted to draw or what I wanted to draw. So going through the school kind of gave me an idea of what directions I wanted to go in. And it's a 3-year program. It's a difficult program. First year, I was like, okay, I think I'll still do storyboards, but let me check out comics. Second year, I was like, okay, I like comics, I guess. I think I'll try to draw them, but only like from people that, have written them, have like done it before so I can learn. And third year, I was like, okay, I guess I'm making my own comics now. I think that's what I'm gonna do. And that's just because like I started to get the bug for it. I started to understand how to create them. I realized that it was honestly the perfect medium for me to create the kind of stories that I've always wanted in my own childhood. It allows me to do it as directly as possible.
Do you see it getting better? Do you see, like, I guess Western comics being more accessible at this point?
I think so. I mean, I think the more that we get, the more diverse creators we get, the more diverse of an audience we get. And that allows us to get all different kinds of perspectives in all the different kinds of stories we love. Um, because that's honestly what we're missing. We're constantly telling the same story over and over again. We all know Batman's origin story, right? So, how many times can we go over that? Give us someone new that leaves as much of an impact. And there are so many people out there in the world that create things, so you might as well go search for a new thing.
When you're working on something where you're working on Inkblot, you're working collaborating, and then you're working on Stoneheart, is
Mhm.
there a pressure where it's like, okay, now you're responsible for everything versus at least there's like an outline or those, sticky notes that you were mentioning?
I think it depends. It depends on the project because I really like being responsible for everything. I honestly do, and it's just because when I'm creating my own story, I like to have I guess I like to have the direction in mind, and I like to be able to make it by my own hands. It just feels like it's one of the most accomplishing feelings in the world, of course, on a personal level. But I think since I have such a specific direction for the kind of stories that I want to tell, it's cool that I have the know-how to create them as well. And that's kind of how I feel about creating my own stories. But when it comes to collaborating and when it comes to like, let's say, for an example, I was the artist on the Radiant Pink miniseries for Image Comics. And that was also amazing in its own right because I got to collaborate with two amazing female writers, and honestly, it was an all-female team. Um, and I got to talk to these people about the world that they created so that I could add on to it. And that's honestly, I think, really cool in its own right. Like collaboration, as I said before, you're making something entirely new that couldn't exist without all of those people with their hand in it. Like you couldn't make something that those two people made. It's exciting. I don't know how else to say it.
Do you have a preference between the physical or digital or watercolor over there, or is it just whatever works?
I think it's whatever works or whatever works best for the story. As I said before, I'm really lucky for the kind of education that I have. I've studied all kinds of different mediums from digital to traditional to just going through all of the different stages of creating a comic. I really like the fact that the stories I create, I can think of how I want it to be finished and how that can emphasize the story. So when I was creating Stoneheart, I right from the beginning wanted it to all be in pencil. And it was just because I felt like the softness of the pencil gave it more of a fantastical feel, and it just shows all of my thoughts that are going on the page, that you can like literally see where I'm going with all of my ideas as I'm drawing. And I think that's the cool part about pencil, and that's the whole point of the entire story of Stoneheart. It's basically following Shade Whisper's thought process throughout it. I want to try all different mediums, so one day I hope I do get to create a watercolor comic.
What is it about fantasy that is appealing to you?
Well, I loved fantasy ever since, I was obsessed with stories, which was since I was a little kid. Any kind of genre of books or movies or television or whatever, I was always kind of gravitating towards fantasy. And like anything, it's escapism. It's just, my preferred kind of escapism. I like the feeling of all the creatures and the organic feeling of fantasy. Like, I feel like people who like sci-fi a little bit more, like more of the man-made type of things and the ships and all that kind of stuff. But for me, whenever I think fantasy, I think organic matter and I think of forests, I think of creatures, I think of magic that, you're born with. And it's just kind of an inherent like nature type of theme. So that's something that has followed with me since I was little. Again, I've always just gravitated towards like fantasy stories. I could even say like the reference for Inkblot, the one of the inspirations for Inkblot I got from when I was a kid. One of my favorite movies, and still to this day is one of my favorite movies, is Kiki's Delivery Service. Kiki and Gigi, her little pet cat that talks. I always thought that was the most magical thing. And when I was a kid, I had a little black cat that was my best friend. Her name was Boosh, and she would follow me everywhere. I would be with her all the time. She'd sleep with me. She was my little black cat to me, being like that little magical witch. So I felt like as a kid, I just was living that life that I loved looking at in all these different stories. And I live with that up until, to this day. I just live a magical little life.
Do you have stuff on in the background while you're drawing or painting?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I always have stuff on, whether it's like music or TV. I know some people do work in silence, and usually if I'm writing, I like to work in silence or just like with really minimal like instrumental music playing. I think when I'm just drawing or painting or inking or something like that, where it's like I'm just physically doing the work, I like to have something that's, I'm paying attention to, that's really nice, that I can take from.
You mentioned something earlier about students. Are you teaching at the Kubert School right
I
now?
I just completed my second year of teaching. They literally had their graduation yesterday. So so I'm kind of rehabbing from that. This past year, I taught the first year's all basic drawing course. And I also teach online for the Kubert School. So I teach the online narrative art class as well. And I'm also teaching their summer intensive course this summer, the narrative art class for that.
Is there pressure there? Is it like, because we were talking about people would come up to you and they think like you're a family member or something, but it's like, do you feel the nerd pressure where it's like someone like read like some one of the Cuberts and then they see like, hey, there's another one, and it's like, do you have that stuff projected onto you?
I mean, honestly, not really. Most people have been really, really kind to me about just everything. Because most of the time they'll come up to me and they'll be like, "Oh, like I know your dad and I know your uncle, but I don't know you. Let me look at your work." And I'm just like, "Go for it." And they're just like, "Wow, this is different." But I like it's fun that a lot of fans actually do somewhat see like they see a little bit of my dad and my grandpa in my work a lot of the time, and it's fun when they like point it out. They're just like, this is all you, but the way that you did this, that looks like what your grandpa does. And I'm just like, wow, like you got a nice eye.
Do you look at their original art? Because like a lot of the action scenes, suddenly it's like all ages. Then all of a sudden, like someone's getting their head cut off by a dragon. It's like, wait, where did this come from? Are you looking at some of your dad's original art or your
Yeah,
grandfather's?
I have books and books of like my grandpa's and my dad's stuff. And I mean, even for like Inkblot for the uh the jungle kind of scenes, like I was looking at Tarzan. So it's I look directly at who came before me because I value exactly what they've done for their entire lives in this field, and they've created an entire career out of it. So you might as well look to who did it better than you and before you. And you can take it and you can make your own interpretation of it. It's automatically going to be your own interpretation because it's not them doing it, it's you doing it, but you're inspired by them. And that's how I take it. I like to be inspired by my dad and my grandpa's work very directly. And it's just because the way that they compose things and the way that they spot blacks and the way that they do certain things is just the coolest thing ever. And it makes sense in my brain.
I was wondering if there's anything that you think we missed or anything you want to throw out there.
I don't think so. I mean, I have Stoneheart is an ongoing series, so just make sure to let your local comic book shop know that it's coming and you want it. And that's the same with Pandora as well. And you can find me on all of my social media, which is basically at Emma Kubert. So there we go.